So one of the most important parts that we look at when we're practicing fishing our loch style wet flies is the retrieves. So there's a few different parts to the retrieve that are all just as important as each other, and you really need to make sure that you're doing each one of those things every single time that you make a cast to be as effective as you can possibly be with the technique. So the first one we're going to look at is what we call the drop. So that's when the flies hit the water and the flies are dropping down through the water column. And this is a popular time when you can actually get a take. So the fish picks up that fly landing on the water and comes over to have a look what it is. And then he sees that fly just slowly sinking down through the water and thinks, well, that's food. So grabs it, and that's where it's really important to be in contact with your flies as soon as you make a cast. So we don't want to cast out in front of the boat and just let everything go loose, because the fish could take it and you won't even know that you've actually had a take. So cast it out, letting it drop down, and we're just slowly keeping in touch with the flies. And if we feel that pull, we can then set the hook. So the drop is the first part of the retrieve that we really want to focus on. The next part is obviously the retrieve. So we're actually stripping the flies through the water. So we've sent that fly down through the water column and now we're stripping. With trout, a long draw is often the way to go. So we've got a nice long, consistent pull, and don't be afraid to fish the flies quite quickly. What we find a lot is that people are often afraid to fish the flies quickly and can result in the retrieve being too slow and not imparting enough movement onto the fly. You've got to remember that the boat's drifting towards where your flies are. So you've got to compensate for that drift. You need to get the flies moving faster than the boat's drifting and really impart some action onto those flies. So don't be afraid to strip quite quick. This will also force the fish into making a decision of whether it's going to eat that fly or not. So we're not only just looking for fish that are looking to eat the fly as food, it could also be tapping into that aggressive nature or inquisitive nature of the fish, where they just see something charging through the water and just grab it out of interest. So we don't really mind why the fish takes the fly as long as they're eating it. So don't be afraid to give it quite a quick retrieve. And there's obviously a few different retrieve styles that you can practice. So anything from just a standard pull like we're doing here, to a figure 8 retrieve, which is going to be a little bit slower, just in the fingers like that, to even a roly-poly retrieve where we've tucked the rod under our arm and we're pulling on the line like this, which is very effective. That creates that constant movement of the fly through the water. And mixing these retrieves up throughout the day is often the difference between success and failure. So there's no point of just throwing it out and consistently doing a pulling retrieve if the fish aren't eating it on that type of retrieve. So mix it up, throw in a little figure 8 retrieve, throw in a roly-poly retrieve, even mix it up on the same cast. It doesn't always have to be the same strip time after time. And often on any particular day, you'll find that there's a particular type of retrieve that's working really well. And then you can obviously stick with that. It could even change throughout the day. In the morning, the fish might be taking it on a really, really fast retrieve, and then the conditions change, a bit of sun comes out, the wind drops, and all of a sudden they want to see a slower retrieve, so you might revert back to a figure 8. So just fish all of those retrieves. Stay in touch with your flies during that drop phase of the retrieve, and you'll have some success throughout both of those parts. And the final one that we want to talk about is the hang, and we talk about this all the time, and that's the end of the retrieve, when we're getting back to the end of our stripping. So we've stripped our flies all the way back in, we've done our retrieve, whichever one we've chosen to do. Just before we get to the end, when we've got about a rod length of fly line out the end of our rod tip, we just want to lift the flies up and just hang them in the water next to the boat. And you catch a lot of fish doing this. So very underestimated part of the retrieve is the hang. That's looking at any fish that have followed that fly up all the way through the retrieve, and for whatever reason they just haven't committed to actually eating the fly. So we really want to make sure that we give those fish an opportunity to eat that fly before we just pull it out of the water. So the last thing you want to do is get back to the end of the retrieve, quickly pull the flies out of the water, and then you'll see a big boil on the water where there was a fish there that was keen to eat your fly. So you need to give those fish an opportunity to eat it as well. So again, we're just coming back to the end of our retrieve, going through our stripping motion. We're coming back to about a fly rod length of fly line out the end, and I'm just going to lift my rod tip and just slowly hang the flies there in the water. Important at this time as well to stay in contact with the flies, a bit the same as the drop that we just spoke about. You really need to make sure that you can feel that take. So there's no point of just letting them completely sit motionless there at the boat with no contact on the flies at all. You still need to be in contact with your flies so that you can pick up that take and set the hook on the fish when you need to. So very important, remain in contact with your flies all the way throughout the retrieve. Fish that hang, you know, you might only get 1 or 2 fish on the hang throughout the day, but that's 1 or 2 fish that you wouldn't have got otherwise. Other days, all the fish will be taking it on the hang. So that's why we fish every different part of that retrieve, find out what the fish are doing on the day, and that'll give you a lot more success, increase your catch rates, give you a lot more fun as well. So that's all our different retrieves. Practice them throughout the day and get out here and have some fun. Oh, oh, yeah, there's a fish. There we go. So he took that coming back towards us and he actually hit it once. Hit it once and I just continued stripping. So important to keep the fly moving. If you feel a take and the fish doesn't hook up, keep stripping. That fish will still be there, still looking for the fly. We just kept stripping and the fish came back around and nailed it on the second go. There's a fair bit of weight there, so could be a nice fish. So on the strip again, so we'd sort of let that drop down. We're just fishing in a little bit of deeper water here. There's a nice bit of depth here, so fishing had slowed up a little bit, so we just changed our drift line, came over to a slightly deeper piece of water. So again, as we said, if things aren't working or if things are a little bit slow, don't be afraid to change something. Change your location, change the depth of water, mix up your retrieve, keep doing all of those things that we spoke about. Just another fat, healthy brown trout there. Look at the depth on that fish. Absolute football of a brown trout. Put up a good fight. So he can go back and we'll get another one. Slip him back in. Away he goes.